Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with Convery, where we caffeinate your curiosity with bold stories, actionable insights, and fresh takes on how you can define and design your own success. Today's guest is a career professional turned coach who is helping high performing men reset, rewire, and reclaim control of their lives. Please welcome Gareth Hellen, a certified life and accountable coach, founder of EvolvedMen Coaching, and experienced financial services professional. Gareth's career spans over a decade across Deloitte, Capita, Huntswood, and the Development Bank of Wales. From managing financial risks and compliance to leading client problem solving and resilience is essential. These experiences gave him a front row seat to how to stress, pressure, and burnout affects professionals and inspired him to create the Reclaim Method, his 12-week coaching framework, helping men reset their nervous systems, rewire their habits, and reclaim their sense of purpose. Whether you're a student exploring a career in finance as an emerging professional, balancing ambition with a well-being, or someone looking for just practical lessons on resilience and leadership, Gareth's story will spark ideas for your own journey. Gareth, I'm so excited. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, I'm very excited too.
So let's jump into some rapid fire questions. What do you think
Okay,
is your superpower?
my superpower, I would say, is I I can get a great read on people and specifically what state they're in. So
Interesting.
I think I can pick up on people's nervous system states very well. I think I can see what's going on in real time. And I've learned over the years to observe that and to not let it mesh with my own.
Yeah.
So I think that's really helped me to bring presence, say, to potentially someone else's panic.
Yeah. Wow, that's like
Yeah.
super insightful. Yeah, it's pretty a superpower why you do what you do.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it. That's it really. Hmm.
right? It fits. What was your favorite subject in school?
So, school was not my favorite place to be.
Okay.
However, I really, really enjoyed English. I think largely because this gave me a way to express myself, whether it was through
Okay.
spoken language or or written creative work. I think it allowed me to express the way I felt, or to at least, work out the way that I was feeling.
Yeah.
So I think that was why I was drawn to it so much. I particularly enjoyed, the creative aspect and the freedom of expression, I would say.
Yep. Awesome.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
all start somewhere with our first
Hmm.
job, and sometimes it's paid, sometimes it's unpaid. But if you think back, um, I always find this interesting for our audience to say, to see where people have come from. What was
Yeah.
your very first job?
Okay, I was 15
Okay.
and I worked for, so there was a a goods and service delivery, have all they would deliver goods and services to other manufacturers.
Okay.
And I worked in the office there. And I haven't thought about this for such a long time. I so I was 15, so that was 20 years ago. And I had just left school and I had gone straight to this job, and it was pretty crazy because there was a lot, it was quite high pressure and quite high volatility, I would say, in terms of there were quite high demands
Hmm.
on workers there. And I, having just left school, didn't really know didn't really know what to expect. So I think I learned a lot there about around discipline, I would say, at quite a young
Sure.
age.
Yeah.
Because they, like I say, they were quite high demands. Um, but yeah, I haven't thought about that for such a long time, but that was my first job.
Interesting. Interesting.
Hmm.
All like transferable skills too that follow you through even,
Yeah, that's
even
it.
as far back as they are, it's
Yeah.
interesting. My last rapid fire question, then we'll jump into your career is if you had to describe yourself in one word, what would it
Mm.
be?
To describe myself in one word, now, how my life is now and how I live my life now, I would say consistent. Um, I think that would be a word that I could proudly describe myself as now,
Yeah.
in terms of showing up. I consistently show up for myself and for other people. And I haven't always been able to say that. That hasn't always been the case. So at this stage in my life and where I'm at, consistent would be, feels like an
Consistent.
appropriate word. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. It's good. Tells a lot. So let's go
Yeah.
into it. You've worked with some of the biggest names in finance, including Deloitte, Development
Mhm.
Bank of Wales. What did these years teach you about leadership, resilience, and navigating these high pressure sort of environments?
Mm. So with the finance years, so they started when I was 21. Um, and they went on until last year. So that was 14 years.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I know.
Wow.
And for for the most part, I think the earlier years I enjoyed more than the later ones because by the time I got to the later ones, specifically the development bank years, my eyes were set on something else.
Hmm.
So when looking back at the earlier years, I think this is where I learned a lot around how to perform under pressure without without losing myself.
Hmm.
So the early years were sort of based around learning on my feet and utilizing that learning under pressure while staying with myself and not losing my way.
Hmm.
This exposed me to a lot of different experiences that people have within that financial environment. And I saw a lot, and this was something that I eventually, the point that I got to was how a lot of people were surviving, specifically in leadership roles,
Mm.
rather than living. I feel there was so much pressure in terms of deadlines, and there were so many different curveballs thrown in,
Yeah.
that I noticed that a lot. And I felt that pressure myself as time went by and I got into leadership roles myself. I related to that sort of survival mode that went with that kind of a high pressure job.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, yeah. I think it also, in terms of the leadership aspect, it was like my for me personally, my outlook on leadership evolved over the years, particularly when I got to my 30s, where I had learned by then that leadership became more about presence rather than performance, because the earlier years it was all performance and it was all being a certain way. And then
Hmm.
I think people can often get lost in that, in the roles that we
Oh
play.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
100%.
definitely, I definitely noticed that in others, and then I had noticed that in myself as well. So I think that was a massive takeout for me by the end, was learning that leadership is more about presence rather than performance.
I agree so much with
Yeah.
you. And what a great like self-discovery for you to see that,
Mm,
right? It
mm,
takes time to back away and see that happening and recognizing it and then figuring out what's next. And
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go. So then you shifted to coaching from
Yes.
this career and focusing specifically on high performing men through life coaching. Um,
Yes.
yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
Yeah, of course. So the shift kind of ties into what I was saying around leadership pressure.
yeah.
This was something that I had fallen into myself, and I didn't know this at the time. I didn't know that I was burning out, so I wasn't consciously aware. I think back then as well, things like burnout and the way that we talk about things now, and the understanding that we have now was not an understanding that we had back then.
Mhm.
And I remember there were times where my life was quite chaotic, and it was represented the chaos within that working environment as well. And I struggled a lot with coping mechanisms while in the roles that I was in. So I've had struggles with alcohol, with binge eating, even around, just around distractive behaviors is
Yeah.
what I would call them, habitual distractions.
Hmm.
And this came to a head for me. So it's just turned 5 years ago when I became sober,
Good for you.
and I was at the end of a gap from when I was going to the next one, and that was when I got sober, and my life drastically changed. It was super, super difficult. It was very, very challenging, to actually be able to do it. So the internal challenge, but also the external challenge. So the social pressures that came with not drinking.
Hmm.
And I've noticed there's been more of an uprising with that over the last 5 years in terms of sobriety and people be more sober curious, say.
Yeah.
However, back then I didn't know anybody who didn't drink. And within the environment, within that financial working space, a lot of it was centered around socializing after work with drink and food or whatnot. And I then got through that. I got sober. I built momentum, and it was so difficult and it was so challenging to not have external support. I didn't feel that in the beginning
Hmm.
of my own personal journey that I was able to access external support for that. However, it was a year later, so I'm a year sober now, and a lot of stuff had come up for me emotionally. So a lot of hidden stress and hidden emotion that had been suppressed by the habits that I'd mentioned.
Yeah.
And that's what led to me going to counseling at the time. So I didn't go to coaching, I went to counseling because my issues were more emotional, related to my emotional state
Yeah.
and things that I needed to process. And I ended up in counseling. I went to counseling for that year, and that was 2022. And then that profoundly shifted my perspective on life, my perspective on myself,
Yeah.
opened up a lot to me. And that led me to, at the end of 22, I started my psychology degree and my counseling studies. So that was 3 years ago that I started that, and that seems crazy even saying that was 3 years ago because that's evolved over the last 3 years. I'm now in a student placement as a counselor, which I love. And I did all of this work while I was in my last position within my financial career. And I'd found by that point, because I'd learned so many external resources, to deal with, stress, burnout, habit management. I'd also learned about my own inner resources.
Yep.
And so I was able to balance all of these things that I was doing to get to where I wanted to go. Because as the counseling training and the degree started, originally 3 years ago, they were more like, I would say, hobbies for me because I was so interested
Yeah.
in the
Intrigued you.
dynamics of that. Yes. However, then I really, really got into it and noticed that I was greatly connecting with myself and with other people. And that became a passion for me then. That was when it became like, oh my gosh, this is something that I really want to do with my life. And so I then expanded into coaching and I did my coaching diploma in 20, yeah, it was last year, so 24. And then that's when I set up my own company. And I knew that because of my own personal experience with working in some work environment, I knew that the coaching that I was going to provide was going to be focused on men that were in a similar situation. Because my counseling is very broad. I don't focus my counseling. It's more of a for anyone to explore their own inner landscape, and I will always facilitate that. But with coaching, as I do feel that is more hands-on and it's can be it's very empowering to be able to give that to somebody. And that was basically the shift into coaching. And that was the reason
Thank
behind
you.
who I target as well and who I help with my coaching.
Yeah, thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing that because
Okay.
as you describe this story too, I know there's a lot of listeners who are
Mm.
maybe back where you were a few years ago and in those
Yeah.
high pressure jobs and trying to see the light of
Mm.
does it ever change? Is there a way to get through it?
Mm.
And I think even more so than ever now, people are struggling in that space. But thank you for being so raw with your story and also sharing the insights because it really resonates with me personally, as well as knowing people that come
Mm.
to me and talk about these things.
Yeah.
So this reclaim method, can you talk a little bit about this framework that you've that you've put together,
Yes.
as well? I think that that would
Mhm.
be interesting.
Okay. So, so back in 24, I had completed my diploma, my coaching diploma, and then I was like, okay, so what do I want to do? Where do I want to go with this? What can I give that only I can give? And I'd looked into coaching for as part of a business whereby was I going to offer weekly sessions like I do with counseling, or would it be more of a commitment based program? And that is what I went for because it kind of comes back to what I'd said earlier with describing myself as being consistent.
Yeah,
I had learned that consistency is what got me from A to B, and that continued into my life in so many ways. I think learning the art of consistency and patience within that consistency was such a turning point for me, rather than looking at something, trying it once, and then thinking, oh, that doesn't work, and not giving it a chance.
yeah,
So remaining consistent. So that was why I devised a 12-week reclaim method, with the aim to help men reset their nervous system, rewire their habitual patterns, ultimately, so they can reclaim control of their life. The I split it into 4 stages, largely because I wanted it to start in the way that I looked back. I did a lot of reflection during the creation of this method,
course.
to what was it that that helped me. I used to find it really hard to articulate my own personal journey because it was so, looking back, it was so quite scattered because I didn't have that external support that gave me a sort of system to follow. A lot of it, I felt like I was just winging it a lot of the time, to be honest. So
Which
I
a lot of
that's
us
what
do.
yes.
Right?
Um, so with that being said, I split it into a four-stage program, and I wanted the start of it to be what I believe for for me myself and for a lot of people, the start of real change begins with grounded regulation and coming to a place of stability in yourself before strategizing.
Hmm.
Now, I think that's been a quite a breakthrough for me within the coaching space is I never overpromise and underdeliver. And I feel that starting with such a slow-paced regulation first perspective has been such a game changer in creating that change. And it's such a good time for the first 3 weeks of the program to be spent unpacking whatever this person needs to unpack so that they can be grounded with me, with them,
Hmm.
and then coming from this regulated space, decide where do they want to go with the rest of this program. What is it that they actually want? Because I've seen it many times where someone will start with me and they have this desire for what they want and where they want to be. And then we go through the first the first stage,
Yeah.
and by the end of that it's well, actually, now that I've sort of calmed down and I've chilled out a bit, I'm
Yeah.
thinking maybe I want to look at this. And it's like, okay, that's always welcome because I think that when we have awareness and regulation, we then have the space to know what we really want.
Yeah.
So that was where the first stage came from. That's reset and ground.
Can I ask you a question about that? Sorry to
Of
interrupt.
course.
Because it made me think of something.
Mm,
And it's really insightful what you just shared about how an example where someone is thinking this and then they go through this process,
yeah.
this self-reflection. Do you think it's a lot also, or not a lot? Do you think it's also tied to this fact that we're so pre-programmed on what success looks like and pre-programmed on how we should all live our lives? I kind of look at the that as something that also you start out really curious as a kid, and then as you get
Mm,
older, you're conforming, and and then all of a sudden you become something. What do you think about this pre-programming thing?
yes, I love that. I love that you said that
To-
because I completely agree. I feel like there's so many shoulds.
Yeah,
I should be, I must be. And when that is brought down, so when you're given space to actually process, what do I want to be doing? What is aligned for me? I think that's when it can be quite surprising what comes up for a lot
yeah.
of
Oh
people.
God, yeah.
I also think it's quite scary and quite daunting for a lot of people because you can live your life, a large part of your life in this programming and in this conditioning that when you
Conditioning
get
is a
to
good
a
word.
point and realize, okay, this isn't what I want, this is someone else's should or must, it can be like, well, what do I do now? I don't know what to do.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a well. I'm so glad you're in this space and doing this because it's such a it's it happened. Everyone goes. I think a lot of people
Mm,
go through this and wake up and be like, wait, hold on. So
yeah.
let's talk a little bit about students, professionals.
Okay.
A lot of them, how do I say this? And I don't mean to be, but there's also
Mm,
pre-programming into the school you go to and what you do and what,
yeah.
oh, my parents did this, so I might try that or whatever. But that aside, I mean, I think we all find our journeys and our pathways, but what sort of perspectives do you have for people who may be getting into some, competitive environments, and just maybe a couple words on maybe how do they manage
Mm,
expectations, maybe build some resilience and also keep perspective? Because as you know, when
mm,
your earlier career, I'll say the same in my earlier career, it was heads down, do the work, sleep under your
yeah,
desk, whatever you had to
yeah.
do.
Hmm.
That doesn't last long. Can't continue that.
Mm,
So some
yeah.
advice around managing expectations for young people, and also you gotta put your best foot forward too. So you gotta balance that, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, what are your
Yes.
thoughts?
Okay, so in terms of managing expectations, I would always say, first and foremost, whose expectations are they?
Mm,
Are they your own personal ones, or do they come from somewhere else? Because realistically, that's just a question to ask yourself. There's no right or wrong answer with that. I just think it's a good space to bring you clarity around where the expectations come from, and if you do you want these expectations? Do
mhm,
you are they are they social pressures or do they come from desire? So I think that would be, I think it's always such a good starting point in so many things is actually asking yourself questions and being super honest with the answer. So I think we can spend a lot of time saying things to other people that we think we should say, largely based on expectation. However, when we are with ourselves and we are being introspective, I feel like honesty, true honesty, is so important with yourself because I think that there's something very empowering about that honesty.
mhm.
And also, I think it can open you up to giving yourself compassion, which I think is so important, particularly around people who are in environments that are high pressure. I think that giving yourself that space, giving yourself that honesty, and giving yourself that self-compassion is super, super duper important. Because one thing I
Absolutely.
do believe, I believe that pressure is a normal thing. We all experience it.
Yeah.
We all have to deal with it. However, I believe that dysregulation is not. And I think it has been normalized for us to live in a dysregulated place where we perform and perform and perform no matter the cost on ourselves. And I think always keeping that in mind and always keep with yourself, because that's something we all will always have is ourselves. And I think it's so important to stay with yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Really
Mm.
meaningful. Really meaningful.
Mm.
I want to switch to another kind of topic, sort of
Okay.
thought process with you, because I think one of the things I often hear too is when we look outward and compare ourselves
Mhm.
to others, we also
Mhm.
look at um, what we tend to see, whether it's on social media, LinkedIn, whatever, a lot of success.
Mhm.
Right? No
Mhm.
one's posting their failures or their setbacks or or things, but we didn't get to where we are, whether however we're perceived or how these people are perceived, without having setbacks and learning from those setbacks. And so I always
Yeah.
tell people, like, fail fast, like figure it out, fail, learn from it, and move on, because you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna have setbacks. Did you have or sharing, maybe in your own experience,
Mm.
um, a setback in your journey that taught you a lesson that you might want to share with others, or an opportunity where you reflected and said, "Wow, that was a tough time, but
Mm.
I really learned something from that." Um, yeah, do you have something in your mind that?
I do. I think it's more related to a time period.
Sure.
So it was the last financial role I was in, and it was around I was studying at the time, and there was a period where there was a project that had come up, and I was one of the project leads, it was so overwhelming. The whole the whole project was overwhelming, and it felt quite old school in the pressure that I was under. It felt
Mhm.
like a pressure that I hadn't experienced for a long time. It was very dysregulating, say.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was at that period um, that one thing I realized from that was I had been doing all of these things, all of these, I was doing my degree, doing my counseling training, and conducting my leadership role. At that point, when I was getting to a place of burnout, that so much of it was identity based, particularly
Oh.
around the job that I had. And I felt, and this kind of ties into the being super honest with yourself. I sat down with that and I had to acknowledge that I was chasing approval. I was underneath all of this, this pushing and this sort of push-pull dynamic that came up. It was approval based,
Hmm.
and this kept me on the outset. So to people I worked with would look at me as being successful on the outside, although internally I was really struggling and not. And if I'm honest, I remember sitting there and thinking, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I'm pushing so hard within this role. And that was a very eye-opening moment. And And I wonder because that was about 6 months before I started my coaching. And I
Okay.
think there was sort of some unconscious working going on there that led me to coaching to lead to me to leave the environment because that felt like a huge setback. But I
Hmm.
suppose as I'm talking about it, it was actually more of a springboard
Forward.
forward.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So
Actually, yeah.
yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
interesting reflection.
Mm.
Wow, this has been such an engaging and interesting conversation. I really enjoy your authenticity and your approach to talking about these things because I think
Mm.
this is needed so much, and especially
Mm,
for young professionals, for men who are of an expectation of how they should be in these environments and do. So
mm,
I applaud you for what you're doing.
thank you.
And continue to do for others. I wanted to ask you if you had one takeaway to share with some of our listeners, thinking about anybody that might be listening, including students and then
Mm,
high performing leaders. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
what would it be? What would you leave them with?
I would say that, and this is going to sound like I'm saying this is an easy thing, and it is not. It's a constant evolution and it's a constant commitment. But I would say to do your best to learn to regulate your inner world before chasing the outer one.
Mm,
Largely because I feel like when you are out there and we all go into different worlds, don't we? Whether
yeah.
it's career based or study based or whatever that may be, they all come with their pressures, and it can be so easy to get lost in other people's pressures or other people's, like we said earlier, expectations. So I think to always stay in with yourself and have your own back and regulate yourself and ultimately stay true to that. Always put that first before chasing anything on the outside, I would say.
Awesome. Awesome.
Mm,
Thank you for that. And also, if people want to get in touch with you or to take advantage of your services and what you do,
yeah.
where's the best
Mm.
way to find you?
So I would say from a coaching perspective, it would be LinkedIn. That's got all of my information on there and
Sure.
my links to things. And that's Gareth Hellen. Is my LinkedIn, sorry. And then I do have my own Instagram, which is reclaim.method. And that's more of a personal service. Like my DMs are always open there.
Nice.
It's not a, it's a free space, I would say, where I share insights and knowledge. And it's just nice to build up that community there.
Thank you for that.
Hmm.
I expect you'll get some followers and some fanfare and some follow-up from this really
Hmm.
meaningful conversation. And thank you. Thank you so much for being a part
Thank
of
you. It's
Coffee
been
with
really, really
Convery.
good. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Hmm.
So that's a wrap for this episode of Coffee with Convery. Thank you, Gareth, for showing us careers aren't just about climbing ladders. They're also about learning, adapting, and finding ways to thrive both professionally and personally.
Mm.
With that, I would like to thank our listeners as well. If today's episode sparked your curiosity, share it with someone navigating their own career journey. Follow us on Instagram for more stories that connect with ambition and authenticity. And this is Coffee with Convery, where we remind you that success isn't always about climbing the corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym.